to do a fun episode. I mean, we'll be spooky, but it'll be fun.
Yeah, I think this will be fun. The subject matter is less dense and less heavy, and we're switching up the format some, so...
Yeah, and I'm not, like, it's not going to end on me just, like, kind of delivering a downer note that we
Yeah,
have
you're
to
not just going to be like,
from.
by the way, history is awful. History is just people killing one another over and over and over again for thousands of years. This is going to be a different one. I think this is a good, light, fun Halloween. This is a good way to wrap up October. Mm-hmm. And then we can be really horrifying again in November.
You know, I'd like to actually try a few different things that are going into November. I would like to try going light for a little bit.
I think light is good for the mental health of everyone involved.
Yeah, plus, like, me personally, like, I do like listening to dense subject matter, and I do like listening to subjects that try to push my perspective in different directions, which is what that I've tried to do, but at the same time, I don't want to do that all the time.
Yeah, it's good to break it up, and I didn't realize just how taxing it gets emotionally to be, like, you know, spend 6 hours delving into something quite as harsh as, like, the Snedeker family haunting. That was a new experience. I didn't realize quite how you know, it's different when I've watched or listened to something and been like, oh, that's interesting, and get one perspective on it for an hour, but then reading it over and over and over and over again for days to try and prepare to tell the story, it's a different experience. And
yeah.
now I know.
Also, for my own mental health, I need to, you know, take a break from some of the darker subjects I've been dealing with.
Yeah, there's we'll just switch it up. We'll switch it up. It'll be good for everyone involved. Us, listeners, the cat.
Oh, she's curled up over there.
Yes, we're hoping that we've given her a blanket in the corner in the chair this time, because normally we don't hang out in our dining room, but she's very clingy and needs to be with us all the time. So if we're in here, she wants to be in here, but she gets bored, so she attacks the tablecloth and runs up and down the hallway. So now she has a nice warm place to curl up and go to sleep, so she can be in the same room with us, but not making noise. So we'll try that this time, and hopefully that works out for the full episode.
Yeah, this experience is weird for her because also I don't think she's a fan of us rearranging the furniture.
Oh no, she hates that.
Which, to be fair, I think most cats aren't really fans of rearranging the furniture, and I think trying a different backdrop where that we're not rearranging the dining room too might help her a little bit, because she's used to us setting things up in the living room instead of the dining room.
Yeah. I got distracted because she's adorable and I'm just watching her sleep now. She's so cute. It's the last week of October.
Which means it's the week before Halloween, which means that we need to carve pumpkins tomorrow.
Yes, we still haven't carved a pumpkin.
I think I am going to try to carve my pumpkin sideways this year.
That'll be interesting.
Because it's long and tall when it stands upright, so I'm actually going to try cutting the hole in what is right now the side of it. So the stem will still stick off to the side, the hole will be where the side is, and then it'll look kind of fat and squat as it's laying down, but it'll have a wide face. That way I can give it a really wide Cheshire Cat smile.
I just decided that as you tell this story in the YouTube video, tomorrow when we carve pumpkins, I'm going to take pictures of the process. So over this, I'm going to do a slideshow in the YouTube video of this pumpkin carving process. Okay. This YouTube video that does unfortunately not come out on Halloween because we are backlogged on our editing.
We're figuring it out as we go.
We are. Thank you for sticking with us. You're awesome.
We're hoping that as we make this more routine going into November and December, we'll be able to get the YouTube up and going, which will be good because if you want to be able to see any images that relate to what that we're talking about, instead of us just saying, hey, this exists, believe me as I describe it, then you'll be able to watch the YouTube video.
Mm-hmm. So if you want a visual reference, we will have that available soon, interjected with many, many pictures of our cat Minerva.
Also, you'll get to be able to see our faces.
I'm sorry about that.
Oh no. I'm not. You have a pretty face.
Your face is great.
You have a wonderful face. That's why I married it.
You married my face?
Well, when you phrase it like that, that sounds a little morbid, but...
Anyways, oh, yes. Thank you very much for pointing out to us the error in episode 1 and the looping effect that it's doing. We are working to get that fixed and re-released. So we hear you. Thank you so much for letting us know. We are fixing that as soon as possible.
Yes, thank you. This is my first time editing a 2-hour thing, so that was must have been my oversight when I was doing that. As soon as we figure out if we can still re-release that episode in a way that is chronologically ordered on Spotify, if not, it might end up just being episode 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 6, 7, 8, 9. But if that's the case, at least it'll be early enough to where that.
We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. So yeah, this is the Halloween week episode, and I'm sad that Halloween time is almost over. There's still lots that I haven't done.
But the spooky season can go as long as you want it to.
I mean, it is Halloween all year round here because we have a black cat.
There can be spooky Thanksgiving, there can be spooky Christmas, there can be spooky Valentine's Day, there can be spooky...
Spooky Valentine's Day!
Spooky Christmas might be a struggle. We can do spooky New Year.
I'm sorry, but Charles Dickens would disagree.
Oh, yeah.
How dare you disrespect my favorite Christmas story in that way?
We can tell judgmental ghost stories then as Christmas approaches. Judgmental ghosts.
My favorite two things.
Yeah, judgmental ghosts just shaming old men on the excesses of capitalism and the oppression of the working class.
Get it. That is our second A Christmas Carol reference in 5 episodes.
What was the first one?
When you called the ghost in Waverly Hills Sanatorium Tiny Tim.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Tim. I am so sorry, Tim.
We can't go there. He's gonna know.
I can neither confirm nor deny that you are tiny. You might be medium, Tim. I'm sorry.
Oof. Anyways. It is the end of October. How are you doing?
Oh, me?
Yeah, how are you?
I am worried that with all this talk about shipping backlogs, that I haven't gotten Christmas wish lists out yet for people, that I haven't started buying family members Christmas presents, and I'm going to try to order people things they want, and I'm going to see, oh, hey, this will be shipping, January 15th.
That is quite the crisis. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of stress that I'm not prepared to deal with at this time.
Yeah, it's going to be weird mental flashbacks to my last job as a shipping coordinator. Flashbacks to the world of logistics from before that.
You know what?
You
get your gifts when you get your gifts. It'll be fine.
Oh, you know what I just did? I caught myself laughing out of my nose just then.
How does one laugh out of their nose?
Oh, like this.
That's just exhaling.
Well, I tend to exhale a lot when funny things happen, and it was one of the worst parts of listening to myself when I was editing, was hearing myself exhale out of my nose. So if anyone listening to this is annoyed by me exhaling out of my nose, I am trying to fix it. I am being conscious of it.
But email us at SpookiStoryPodcast@gmail.com and tell us about the exhaling.
Yes.
I will email us and tell us about the exhaling every time you exhale.
Oh no, is it actually coming from you, or is it coming from are you going to just create a fake account just to troll me?
Yes, I have time for that. I will do that.
That's SpookiStory.
Yes,
at Gmail. Yes, I had to
podcast,
visualize that.
Podcast.
Yes. STORY podcast at gmail.com. I had to visualize that in my head as I was talking about it.
I can't spell either. It's fine. Oof.
How's your week been?
I'm still applying to jobs as I am still unemployed, and it is rough out there. It is rough. I've applied to so many jobs that either do not get back to me, or they send me rejections, or they email me back with something with offers and salaries and things that don't match their original listing. It's far less. It's responsibilities that are completely different from the original listing. But at the same time, I get told everybody's hiring and no one wants to work. Well, maybe this is why no one wants to work. Why are they all lying to me? I don't understand. It is so frustrating. I'm sorry for venting about that. I mean, I could go on for a while.
If anyone listening would also like to vent.
Yes, vent. We can just turn into a venting about jobs thing. Another person who...
That would be quite the switch in podcast.
That would be such a switch. But if you want to vent, let's do it. I don't know. Maybe we'll just like start a whole like Google Hangout where we can just bitch about this. It'll be great.
That'd be quite the Twitch episode.
I don't understand Twitch, but I will figure it out for this experience. Speaking of, I just want to read this this job listing that I found today, and I want you to take a shot every single time you hear a red flag.
Everyone got your shot glasses ready? We didn't warn you, so go ahead and pour yourself a shot.
You can pause that, it's fine. This is a job that I came across today that I just have to vent about. The position in the title is listed as partially remote.
So partially remote means they let you go home and sleep at night?
The salary range is $37,000 to $70,000 a year.
And 37 to 70, I guess they said 37 just because having 35 as the low end being half the amount of the high end would have just been just too extreme. So they're very generous like that. Yeah, very generous.
These ranges don't make any sense. Just list what you're paying, please. I will now read the description to you. It starts off in all caps. Are you a kick-ass media buyer, planner, guru ready for a change?
No.
We're looking for a rock star senior media planner / buyer that loves analyzing, planning, and buying media across clients and markets. You are potentially the right fit if you're organized, efficient, and proactive and are rewarded by being part of a team that consistently provides effective media solutions. I don't know why I wasn't breathing. I'm sorry. The planner / buyer works closely with internal departments and media partners to execute strategic media recommendations. You should be comfortable in a fast-paced environment and be skilled in working with diverse groups of people. You would be a key day-to-day manager of the client's media plans by helping coordinate and direct all media campaigns for the assigned accounts. All caps. In-person position. Our team loves collaboration. So which is it? Is it partially remote or is it in person? Also, what are you doing at this job?
The job is in person. However, they do let you go home to sleep at night. They do let you leave at dark, provided that you've done all your work assigned to you. So that's why it's partially. If they're feeling generous, you may go home to your own bed.
If you're job hunting right now and you're feeling like it's an uphill battle, this is why. I'm sorry. I'm there with you. This is absurd. Anyways, that's how my week is going. That sums it up right there.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to theorize that the reason there's such a discrepancy in the amount of money you'll be paid is because they're going to give you $70,000. However, this job requires you be so high intensity type A all the time that you will spend $33,000 of that on uppers, be it caffeine or cocaine or amphetamine pills, just so that you can be the rock star for this likely very mediocre company that they want you to be. And then you take home $37K after that.
What does $33,000 worth of caffeine look like?
I guess it depends on the quality of the coffee you're buying with it.
I can't decide if that's a good incentive or not. Do you want to get into the episode?
Okay.
What the reason we're here? I can stop venting now.
Or you can keep venting. If anyone who's listening would like to vent, we're here to listen too. Anyway, what's...
Please vent to me. Let's start a support group about job hunting in 2021. Please help me. I'm sure there's going to be a different kind of venting from me by the end of this episode. I have a feeling I'm going to learn some things I'm not ready to know.
Oh? Why?
From you.
What is that?
I suppose we'll find out in an hour or so.
There's me breathing out my nose again.
Today's episode is about a very peculiar phenomenon that happens to many people as they're sleeping. And this occurs either as you are falling asleep or as you are waking up, when your brain is suddenly active, but your body is immobile. During these episodes, you may sometimes see intruders or even a demonic presence in your room. The creatures that you see almost always mean to cause you harm, but you're paralyzed in your bed and unable to stop them. And suddenly you will wake up and find that you are alone. And this is the phenomenon known as sleep paralysis.
It happens to me. But luckily, when I wake up from it, usually you're next to me, and usually there's a cat there too. It'd be worse if you woke up and you were alone. Yeah, that'd be...
All of my information on sleep paralysis comes from a purely research academic-based perspective, as I have personally never experienced sleep paralysis. I have only experienced being the horrified significant other to notice their spouse leap out of an episode of sleep paralysis.
You never know, because you always tell me that you don't dream. But everyone dreams, sometimes they just forget it. Maybe you do experience sleep paralysis, but what you see in the room is so horrifying that to preserve sanity, your brain chooses to forget about it as you wake up.
Thank you. Thank you for that. That was great. It's comforting. Between 25 and 50% of Americans have experienced sleep paralysis, and between 5 and 8% experience it regularly, which makes you quite the anomaly.
It's 25 to 50% is
it's
the
huge
difference between 1 out of 4 or 1 out of 2.
It is the difference between
That's an incredible
$37,000 and $70,000. There's a lot of conflicting research, and the numbers are all over the place on sleep paralysis. But no matter what the numbers are, the episodes are horrifying to read about.
Yeah, they're not the nicest thing that happens.
Yes, it's terrifying to hear you tell me about them in the morning, too.
Yeah, they're also not the only weird thing that happens to me while I sleep.
I know, you don't remember. See, this is fun because you only experience your sleep paralysis and I don't experience it. Mm-hmm. However, only I experience your sleepwalking and you don't experience it. So I think it's a fair trade.
Yeah, nowadays, anytime that I have to, stay the night with another group of people or someone else, I always try to warn them about the sleepwalking because I didn't know how bad it was until I got into my early 20s and I was consistently around you. And you started telling me how often I did it. And now I'm just horrified at how many times I might have been at, a sleepover or something in high school and just hovered over a friend's bed or something, and they woke up and were horrified and just didn't want to tell me about it the next day. That's somewhere in the back of my mind. I'm just I'm sure I probably did that, and they didn't know how to talk about it the next day. And
someone's written into a different podcast about that time that their friend Peter was standing over them while they were sleeping in middle school.
Just blank eyes,
No, you don't stand there blankly. You
No.
always have something terrifying to say. Always, consistently. Other people describe their partner sleepwalking and they're like, oh, they said something funny, oh, we have to go get the cucumbers from Home Depot. I don't know why that was the funniest thing I thought of. But you're always just straight up guess what? There's a demon in the corner. Should we take care of it? Every time. Every time it's something horrifying. And I don't.
We could probably do a whole episode.
We could do a whole thing just on what I have seen when he sleepwalks. But today is actually about sleep paralysis. Mm-hmm. We'll do sleepwalking another time.
Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of curious to hear who else has this, who might be listening, how that their experiences might be different or similar to what that I experience, because it sounds like there are some similarities, but there are also some differences. I'm also curious how people interpret their experiences as well. I'm also curious how often that this happens with people, because sometimes I'll get a couple episodes back to back within a few weeks, and then other times I go a couple months without an episode. I used to get this most often in my late teenage and early 20s. I still get it sometimes, but it seems like it's lessened a little bit. It seems like these mostly happen in unfamiliar locations. There was a time when I was at school, I'd be in the library studying, and it would be boring subject matter, so I'd doze off, but it'd be bright lights, and there'd be people all around me as I've got my laptop in front of me. And when that would happen, it'd be very common for me to be fully aware that I was not able to physically move and in a public place, which for that to be scary, I didn't even need to have a demon or something floating around me. It was just the idea that I had my head in my hands and was dozing off in a very public place and was very vulnerable.
So something that I did read in this research was that nappers are more susceptible to sleep paralysis. So it's interesting that that's...
Well, that makes sense then, because if it supposedly happens mostly when people are drifting in or coming out of sleep, then that makes sense.
Because I think that research is backed up by the idea that it happens in a REM cycle or when it's hard to get to a REM cycle. There's so much about sleep paralysis that is just theories that is presented as fact. Every article that I read was presenting a different fact about why it happens.
I did look into the whys, and I got a few different explanations that were all very confidently given to me, despite the fact they contradicted each other. I suspect the problem has to be that, like, dreaming is an experience that you're aware of, even though you're not conscious, and because there's not a definite scientific theory yet of what consciousness or awareness is, because consciousness, they can say it's neurons firing in the brain, but awareness seems to be something a little different because it seems to happen in other ways. We'll get into that later.
You ready for me to find my first story?
Okay, yeah, if you got stories,
I've got stories from
I'll listen to stories.
Other people who have experienced sleep paralysis.
See how that compares to me.
My first story today comes from a YouTube account from Makeup with Raji.
Is this an account you follow?
It's not. I actually found her through researching.
Oh, I just asked because makeup.
Yeah, for anyone who's not aware, I do makeup on myself for Instagram and TikTok. That is the makeup connection. But yes, ironically, I found a sleep paralysis story from an account called Makeup with Raji, where it's not her usual content, but she had an event that startled her so much she made a video about it to try and find other people who had experienced something similar. In her video, she explains that she's never had anything like this happen to her before. But one night when she was sleeping, she describes it as waking up within a dream. And she woke up standing over herself, sleeping.
Okay.
So she woke up looking at herself.
Okay.
Which was very confusing. And then when she looked around her room, she saw another figure at the foot of the bed, sitting on the ground, hugging its knees and rocking back and forth, which startled her so much that she ultimately woke up. But she woke up with her arms pinned to her sides, and she was completely unable to move, at which point she remembers her husband coming into the room, who is unaware that anything is wrong. And it takes her a while to come out of the episode. And when she's finally able to move again, she's explained to her husband what happened, and he's saying that he didn't know any of this was going on. Mm-hmm. The second part of it sounds like classic sleep paralysis. Uh-huh. But it startled her so much because she's never experienced anything like this. Uh-huh. And, I mean, she's an adult. Typically, it seems like this is happening under 25 and then less common over 25. I don't know her age. I don't know if she's under or over 25. But it would be unusual to experience in the first time as an adult.
Yeah, and I guess, and this would be another thing I'd be curious to hear what people think. Personally, anytime that I have an episode like this, even if it's, at this point, the 100th, it's still a frightening experience. I read all kinds of advice about how to make sure that you can stay calm through a sleep paralysis episode. And I never actually hear that this person says that it works on themselves. Usually they're talking about giving advice to other people, so it always comes across a bit suspect, because I have never been able to remain calm during a sleep paralysis episode. And I'm just curious if anyone has sleep paralysis, has found out a method that works for them that could then be shared, because that could help a lot of people. But that story kind of reminds me a little bit. So there was a time, restless sleep, anytime that we've stayed at your parents' house quite a bit. I mean, there have been times when that I've woken up and my body's still been paralyzed, and I've just suddenly finally been able to force myself out of it. By the time that I do, and I jump out of bed and I'm full of energy and I'm screaming bloody murder, and then the next day no one in the house will have been able to hear me.
No, that always is wild to me, because I mean, obviously I'm sleeping next to him, so I wake up when he just starts screaming in the middle of the night. And then the next day I'll be like, did anyone hear this? I'll ask my brother, his wife, my parents, like my cousin if she's staying there. Did you hear Peter screaming? And it's not like we're in a separate like part of the house. Like my brother's room is across from mine. So if we're staying there, we're all on the same hall. And everyone's like, oh no, I didn't hear anything. Which makes me feel like I'm experiencing a totally different reality.
The cat will save us. We have a cat and she's fierce. But this one particular time, it actually wasn't a time that we were all sleeping together. It was a time that I had fallen asleep on the couch in your living room. And I woke up, but my body was still paralyzed. Actually, this is the only time that I think I've seen something that's been like crouching, holding its knees.
Oh, okay. I didn't know this part of the story.
Usually they have arms outstretched.
Ugh.
Yeah, like it's about to embrace.
Ew.
But this was the only time, and it was sitting, because there's those windows in your living room looking out over the back. There are the trees, and it was sitting over by the trees. And even though it was a small object, it took up a large area, and the area it took up was expanding. I remember it was trying to come through the living room, and your dog was sleeping there. Cassie was sleeping there, and I thought it was looking for Cassie. So I remember screaming at my sleep version was screaming at this thing not to come inside, that it wouldn't be welcome. And it seemed to think that it was welcome inside. But I was screaming at it. And then I finally came out of it and looked over, and Cassie was just kind of like alert, just kind of looking around. She wasn't really sleeping like she was, but she was still laying in the same spot.
How I remember this is I think we were in my parents' house alone. I believe that this happened right after we had come back from London.
I was trying to remember. I know I was sleeping. It was because of the jet lag.
Yeah, I think it was the day after we had flown back from London for your cousin's wedding. And I was awake. I was sitting in the living room. Cassie was sleeping on her bed. Cassie's a large German Shepherd who was a little older at this point. And you had fallen asleep on the couch. And the way I remember it is you were just sleeping perfectly fine. And then all of the sudden, there's just this guttural scream. And in this very half awake, half asleep state, you start telling me that there was someone in the backyard who was trying to come in, who was asking for an invitation to enter the house, and you were screaming at it that it was not permitted. And you went on for like 20 minutes about this thing and about
it to you,
and about like the land being like unclean or something. Like it went in directions, and you were still like lying very still and speaking to me in a very flat tone about this man in the backyard. And it was horrifying. It was so weird. Like I've never experienced anything like that. And just you were saying it so flatly and so matter-of-factly. You weren't explaining it like a dream. You were explaining it like you had legitimately just been out there telling this man that he could not enter the home.
See, that's the funny thing about it, because it wasn't a man. It was a male energy in the dream.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
But it wasn't, it wasn't a human man. At least it wasn't any human. It didn't look like a human man.
What did it look like?
Well, I told you, actually, this was the only time that something was hugging its knees.
But what did it... So it was hugging its knees. That's what it's physically doing. But what did it look like?
It did have a pale, slightly greenish tint to its skin. Like it was extremely ill or near death.
Voldemort. So you saw sickly Voldemort in the forest. Okay. All right. In the forest behind my parents' house. Okay. All right.
Forest makes it sound big. It's like a thicket with some power lines.
It is. It's hard to describe. My parents.
But it was in the area where and this isn't going to make any sense to anyone listening, but just so you know, it was in the area where that little fire pit that your parents bought more recently.
Oh, that's really close to the house.
It was in dead center of the backyard, like right where the trees end and the grass begins.
Okay, I've always pictured this way back. So my parents live kind of like at the bottom of a hill by a creek where there's a huge wooded area in the backyard, but they're still like in a suburban subdivision. And I always, for some reason, pictured this, maybe for my own sanity, that the creature was like farther back in the middle of the woods towards the trees. But what you're describing is something that is like 3-4 yards from the back door. Cool.
No,
cool.
3-4 yards is, I'd say, that's about 6 yards, I'd say.
Okay, great. 6 yards. 6 yards away from where my parents eat breakfast was this little green-gray creature trying to come in. Cool.
Yeah, and it was dream world, so it wasn't moving around with your typical Euclidean geometry. So it's like it was still, but its essence was expanding radially around it.
Ew.
And that's when it reached those back windows.
Ew.
It wasn't exactly a man, not any living man. Its body wasn't coming, its essence was coming in, which is kind of sleep paralysis also, because you'll feel like your essence is detached from your body itself.
Okay. I don't know why I hate that worse. Because you never describe, like, essence or vibes or, like, male energy. Like, you never use those phrases. So there's something about you being, like, a very logical, analytical person, not really ever talking about anything paranormal, when you use to describe these sleep paralysis episodes, that's just very jarring and unsettling to me, and adds like an extra layer of credibility that is very startling.
This was a few years back, and my perspective on things was a little different then. So I was going to describe it using very material terms at the time.
But even how you described it to me, 6-7 years ago when this happened was pretty horrifying. Because you were very concretely telling me there was a man in the backyard and he wanted to come in.
Yeah.
And I remember you telling me about something that he wanted to do to Cassie, but I think I blocked that part out.
Just come in, talk to her, pet her, and then possibly take her with him.
Oh, no, he can't have my dog. Absolutely not.
Yeah, no.
Absolutely not.
I remember the intent was very focused on Cassie.
Oh, that's weird.
The intent wasn't really focused on me. The intent wasn't really focused on you. The intent was very focused on Cassie.
Oh, that's weird. Absolutely not. Ooh, okay. I don't like that.
Yeah, no, I didn't like it. That's why I told you all about it.
No, but it was really unsettling because when you were telling me about it, you almost were in a daze when you told me about it. Like, I really didn't know if I was talking to a wake Peter or a sleep Peter, because you were still using a cadence that you use when you speak to me when you're sleep talking and sleepwalking. So that's why this story, I've never really known how to take it.
Okay.
Because it was a combination of events.
I think it's because anytime that I come out of a sleep paralysis episode, I will still kind of be in a half sleep, even after I've come out of it and I'm actually able to move around.
I've tried really hard to forget that episode, but that episode was creepy because that house is it was a new build when we moved in, but it was every now and then something that I don't really have an explanation for will happen in that house. And then it wasn't really until I met you and you started telling me early on that there was something strange about the land that neighborhood was built on that I didn't think anything about it until you started being like, something's off here.
Yeah, because it's not your house in particular. Like I said, when I first met you, I didn't see the world that way, so I don't really have a way to describe it. So all I would just say is that I think I did describe it as this land isn't clean.
Yeah, you told me that like the land was built without respect, I think is something that you said a lot then.
Yeah, somebody feels disrespected. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I haven't looked into it at all, so I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think there is really a record of that land. Not that I'm really aware of. It was just an interesting correlation.
Do you have another story? That was my story.
I do have another story that is not mine. My second story is from a writer on the internet who would rather remain anonymous, and they write, "So I am in my early 20s, and I used to have mild hallucinations when waking up without the use of an alarm while being unable to move. This was years ago, and it never really bothered me, but it happened this morning, which is kind of my fault. I hung a jacket by the hood on a closet door in front of me the night before, and when I woke up, I saw a woman standing with the jacket on and her back turned. Somehow, I assumed someone I knew was lying in bed beside me. I don't know who."
Okay, sorry, keep going. But no thank you.
"So I was trying to yell to the person beside me. Then slowly, the woman turns so I can see her from the side. And it was my cousin who died last year. And it was just staring at the mirror on the door. At this point, I am losing my shit, but I can't seem to yell out. Then all of a sudden I regain movement and I end up yelling, "You see her, right? Right? What the fuck is happening?" I turn and there is just a blanket lying beside me. And when I look back, I easily make out just the jacket hanging on my closet door. I'm still freaked out.
Ugh.
So this was a common theme. There are some cultures who attribute the presences that you see during a sleep paralysis episode to recently deceased loved ones.
Which bring up mirrors, and then you also bring up doppelganger.
Kind of. I guess it could be interpreted that way. Which, I mean, it could be attributed to whatever entity is tormenting the writer by mimicking his deceased cousin, or it can be interpreted as the spirit of his deceased cousin. But I guess that's the thing, is you would never really be able to know.
Yeah, because people dream about people who have died all the time, but
I don't.
I've never had a dead person I'm aware of or I know of showing up in a sleep paralysis episode for me, so that's
interesting.
That's curious.
When I was little, many of my family members died in a very quick succession, and I have never had dreams about them, ever, so that's interesting. And I'm not saying that other people don't experience that. I'm just saying that I personally have not.
Anytime I've had a dream about someone who's died, usually it's very anxiety-ridden. Usually there's some kind of feeling of regret. Either that person will still be alive in my dream and I need to give them something, but I'm unable to, like, give this object to them, or I let them down somehow in some way, and they expect me to be somewhere or do something, and I'm unable to do that task.
Wow, okay.
That one's actually a bit harder for me to relate to.
Interesting, okay. I thought that with the first story, with the idea of waking up and looking at yourself sleeping, that you would have more to tangent on with that one.
Actually, yes, I do, and I want to talk about that more later.
Okay.
I have a lot to tangent
we can cut that
about out-of-body experience. Oh, no, keep it in. I have a lot to tangent on with the relationship that I have personally between out-of-body experiences being combined on top of, or one leads into the other with a sleep paralysis episode. I jumbled that sentence. But I
liked the second story because there was something very, very specific about thinking that they're seeing a deceased relative, but also thinking that there's someone next to them. Like there was, and obviously this person that they had fabricated was someone of comfort because they were trying to wake that person up in this episode and trying to talk to that person. It was like they were seeing something, but then their brain also invented some level of comfort, some level of like, I have a person here with me to take care of me.
Yeah.
Which I thought was something very specific and very interesting, especially, you didn't know I was going to tell this story, but earlier you were like, well, it's comforting to know that I wake up and I have you next to me and I have the cat next to me. It's one of those things that just kind of lucked out. I didn't know you were going to say that, and you didn't know I was going to tell this story, but I thought it was an interesting account.
Yeah, because I remember being little kid. My sleep paralysis episodes were really scary then when I was, elementary school age, and I'd be facing the closet as I was sleeping positioned, and there'd always be something. So common for kids to think there's something in the closet, but
not during a sleep paralysis episode, because I didn't. That didn't happen. I don't.
Yeah, because actually this is the earliest time that I can remember it was I was asleep. And I woke up a little bit and kind of rolled over because I wanted to face away from the closet, but I think I had rolled over into my pillow, and my brain realized that I was facing down into the pillow and couldn't breathe, so I woke up and I was not able to breathe, so I was like struggling for a little bit before my body finally came to, and I was able to just push myself up and away from I think this was even before I started elementary school. This is one of my earliest memories of a dream. Yeah.
So you're like a toddler.
Yeah, this was... Yeah.
Oh, it's horrifying.
But I know I was sleepwalking a lot then, too, because So apparently I used to end up in my parents' bedroom a fair amount.
Okay.
So, and I had no memory of that the next morning. So I guess I was just waking up, walking out of bed, and wandering around the top floor of my house until I wound up somewhere. But the other one I wanted to talk about was the time that was super duper weird. It was right before that we moved to Nashville, and we were just about to move out here, so I was staying with my mom for a little bit, and you were coming over to stay with her because we were kind of getting everything lined up, ready to move.
I think that's when I worked at Portrait Innovations. I think I lived with you and your mom at that time.
Yeah, that was right before we moved out to Nashville, so we were kind of getting everything organized and together, and we were at that apartment. And this apartment is at the end of an apartment complex, and it's actually at the end of a hallway, too, from where
Also
the
on
stairs are.
the
On the third floor.
Top floor.
But it was really nice because most of the time it was really quiet, and that bedroom just looked out onto trees, and it didn't hear people walking by and didn't really see anything. There was that one time, everyone in the apartment woke up at the same time. There are two things that always put me off or make me feel like something's not right. One is there will usually be some kind of a bad smell. And I think that's why that I used to call things being like not clean or dirty before that I had words to describe what I was experiencing. And for me to say there's a bad smell is a lot because typically I have a very poor sense of smell. And the other thing is things will feel hot. I know some people feel cold when they don't feel right, but I always feel really hot and burning up. And so you and I were sleeping in the one bedroom, and my mom's bedroom is on the other side of the apartment across from the living room. As I was sleeping, suddenly I come to, and there's something outside the window just hovering there. And we're on the third story, so there's trees behind us. There's nothing it could be standing on. It's just hovering outside the window. And it wants to get in, and there's a closet right next to the window. And it wants to go into the closet. It wants to make itself a little home in the closet for whatever reason. It starts to pass through the window. It gets partially through the window. Suddenly, I'm able to finally force myself out of the sleep paralysis. And this is the middle of the night, and I shoot up out of bed, and the apartment is boiling hot. I am sweating, and I look around. I don't see anything. But then I hear my mom, and she's up, and she's walking around the living room in the middle of the night. And you were awake too. So everyone got woken up at the same time. And you said that you kind of experienced something similar as well.
What I experienced in those moments was pretty unusual for me because we mentioned earlier, I don't remember my dreams. I don't have very vivid dreams. But I do remember, and this was years ago, but I vividly remember my dream from that night where I was stuck in a dream that was basically a feature-length horror movie. You and I lived in that apartment. We kept experiencing things moving around our apartment and voices in our apartment, and terrifying things happened in this space to us and your mom. And the dream lasted for months and then escalated to the point where we called in help. And then finally, like a priest or somebody realized that there was a demon living in our closet, which kind of sounds funny saying it. But yes, in this dream, we realized there was a demon in the closet and we had to exorcise the closet. And then I woke up, and I woke up to Peter throwing the doors of the closet open and telling me there was something in the closet, which was the most fucking horrifying moment of my life, because I was trapped in this nightmare where there was an entity who was trying to do us harm living in this closet, and all of a sudden my fiance is in the closet telling me there was something in the closet.
And there were like several items that I took out of the closet too.
He was ripping stuff out of the closet.
I took several things out of the closet and I put them on the back porch of that apartment. They didn't come in again for like a week. But you know what? After I did that,
it never happened again.
It didn't happen again.
It was all over. I can explain how we were somehow experiencing the same thing at the same time in two different layers of sleep. Also, the important thing to remember about that room is it had two exterior walls that were not well insulated. So If it was hot outside, that room was hot. If it was cold outside, that room was cold. This happened in the dead of winter, so it was always cold in that room. We woke up, we checked the thermostat. That night it was like 85 degrees.
Yeah, it was boiling
in January.
hot. And we do live in the South. There are occasionally warm days.
This was not one of them.
But this was not one of those warm days.
To this day, we have never asked his mother what she experienced that night.
At this point, it's been so long, I
don't
kind
know
of
if
wonder
she'd
if she would
remember
remember.
That is, without a doubt, the most unexplainable thing that has ever happened to me. Because
Yeah,
for us to have the same experience, like, because nothing would have primed us for that night. It's not like we had, at that time, we certainly didn't have a lot of, like, stories about paranormal activity or demons or anything like that. You know, we had other things going on in our lives, so that was, I don't know. I'm at a loss for words for that.
But I can't remember exactly all the items. I remember one of them was a sleeping bag.
I vividly remember, the only one I remember is the sleeping bag.
But there were just several items. I was half asleep, so I just grabbed whatever items didn't feel right to me, put them out on the back porch of the apartment, and was like, okay, you can stay out there for a few days.
Yeah, I vividly remember the sleeping bag.
But yeah, that was not a case where there was something crouching. That was a case where that something actually did physically make it in through the window and made it close to the closet. It was like in my sleep paralysis episode, it wasn't coming after me. It's like it had gone out from something in the closet and was trying to get back into that again.
Ew.
Like it's like it was coming back from like a night out type thing.
The demon went for a night out. It was like, I just have to go clubbing for a minute. Please let me back in. I forgot my key. All right.
Insert joke about the club scene in North Carolina.
There was one. It was 2015. There was one.
So do you have any others for me that you've...
We already shifted into the paranormal part of sleep paralysis pretty early.
There's no real way not to, though, because when you experience it, it is very real and it is very otherworldly.
But every time you Google it, it's just a bunch of doctors telling you a different theory as to why it's purely scientific and how most ghost stories can just be blown off because it's probably sleep paralysis.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting thing researching, is because for this episode, I feel like somehow too much information and too little information at the same time.
Yeah.
Because it was all doctors just totally dismissing it and saying that this discounts every account of ghost.
Well, that's why I had so much trouble explaining the early time when that happened when you were around me, when we were at your parents'. That's why I had so much trouble describing it to you, is because I did at that time want to be mentally very dismissive of it.
That's fair, because it just opens too many doors for me when I think that you're experiencing sleep paralysis. Because you sell it real well. You're in very good company, though, experiencing sleep paralysis, because there is some version of it or some folklore surrounding the experience in nearly every culture across the globe for thousands of years.
Because when we were talking about the Snedekers and the two parents experiencing incubi...
Okay, yeah.
Is it incubi? Incubuses? Incubi?
I actually don't know. Incubi, incubus, yes.
Okay. When they were experiencing that at night, I kind of wanted to be like, sleep paralysis.
Interesting, okay.
But I didn't want to go too far off on a tangent, and I knew it was coming this episode. Sorry, keep going.
That is something that comes up a lot. I'm not going to heavily go into it this episode, but incubi and succubus are something that comes up a lot in sleep paralysis as well.
Our neighbor's coming up the stairs.
Should we be quiet until they come up and cut this part out?
Yeah, might as well. Who knows how many times they're going to slam the door.
Very old house.
There is some kind of superstition that says you're supposed to slam a door multiple times if you're worried that bad luck's following you.
Never heard that.
I don't remember how many.
If we're worried about superstitions and bad luck, I mean, we adopted a black cat, so...
Black cats aren't bad luck.
I heard if they sneeze, it's good luck.
She doesn't sneeze very often.
She doesn't sneeze. She's so good, though. She's so perfect. Insert picture of her here. Our cat is a little codependent. She showers with me.
But then you try to put her in the shower, and she's horrified.
If I let her out of the bathroom, she gets mad. If I let her into the bathroom, she's mad. In Western culture, sleep paralysis is often attributed to the night hag or old hag syndrome, which is characterized by an old woman or an animal sitting on your chest, pinning you down and obstructing your breathing.
Which is curious because I've never had that one.
Really?
Never once has the entity actually physically touched me. There's sometimes the attempt to come close and touch me, and that's when I go into full-on panic mode and, like, push myself out in a way to, like, push this thing out in a way so it can't touch my body, and then that's when I give myself out-of-body experiences. But I'll get into that later, sorry.
What? Okay. So I have someone's personal account of a visitation by the old hag, sometimes considered a witch. I am 42 and first had a nightmare about a terrifying witch at the age of 16. She kneels on my chest and stares into my face, slowly getting nearer and nearer. I am completely terrified. She wears a black cloak and hood. Her face is like a witch, and evil generates from her, surrounding me from her. Other times I can be lying on my stomach and she will creep her hand up the back of my head, down my face, and hook her fingers under my top teeth and pull my head back. Other times she will bite, sit on the bed, knock the door, call my name, and generally scare the crap out of me.
I can't think of many times I've experienced the same entity. That'd be to experience the same one over and over again. Like, I can think of certain similarities. Maybe some of my sleep paralysis dreams have been the same dream kind of in a separate way.
Yeah, I've already kind of noticed a common theme about something kind of radiating your presence and trying to enter your space.
It's the dream world. It doesn't necessarily have to follow our physics. So a lot of times things can take up a larger space or a smaller space. Think about an out-of-body experience where that you might be dreaming and then your essence is somewhere else nearby your physical presence. So both stories I've told so far, the one at your parents and the one at my mom's, both those were a masculine presence, but they were two different ones. At my mom's, that one lived with something that was in the closet. That's why I was pulling things out of the closet. With the one that was at your parents', I've never seen that before, never seen it since. Whatever that was where it came from, and that's where it stayed.
I'm really mad that that one wanted my dog.
Yeah, there's usually an intent. Usually, anytime that I've dreamed about something, it's usually there for something or to go somewhere. I'm so thankful that, knock on wood here, that never been touched.
Oh, then what happens if it touches you?
Yeah, I don't want to know.
Okay.
I don't want to know. But it requires, like, every ounce of, like, mental, because it's not physical, but it feels physical in your dream, but mental exertion to force away and push your presence outward and in an expanding bubble to keep it away.
This is interesting because most of the accounts that I've read about sleep paralysis involve something touching you or something in the room with you trying to get at you.
Yeah, in the room.
It's just so weird because it's so different for everyone and somehow the same. But yes, there's a lot of accounts in many different cultures about a creature sitting on your chest and physically trying to stop you from breathing. That is really the most common element that I saw in my research. In Islamic cultures, sleep paralysis is often attributed to an attack from the jinn. So if you experience the phenomenon of waking up and not being able to breathe or not being able to move, then you're saying that you've been attacked by the jinn. And the jinn is sometimes classified as a spirit and sometimes classified as a demon. If I'm getting that wrong, please tell me.
So I'm 90% sure in Islamic culture, jinn would just be its own thing.
Okay.
So yeah, you've got humans, angels, and yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's its own category. You wouldn't have to move it into one or the other.
Okay. So the best I can equate it to the Western world would be like it's a demon-like.
Actually, yeah, you could probably, because demon comes from Greek for Damien, which is a spirit entity essentially.
Okay. In Brazil, there are stories of a crone-like creature called the Presidaria with long fingernails that waits on top of the roof until you fall asleep before it comes into your house and presses the air out of your chest.
Do you remember I had that dream where that I was asleep, but I was out here in the living room, and I said I saw long fingers coming up at the windows. And
No, I fucking don't. What are you talking about?
Do you remember me talking about long fingernails?
No.
Like, do you remember that a few months back, probably about 6 months back now, and I was, you know what's horrifying? Just long fingers. You were doing an audition one time, and I was trying to tell you...
I remember that. I remember I was doing an audition, and you started to tell me about this ancient deity, and they had dug up a sculpture of it with really long fingers, but I didn't know that it was associated with any sort of sleep paralysis or dream you'd ever had.
No, that was, well, the sculpture thing was something different. It just reminded me of this dream that I had, and we're on the second floor, and the entire building, there were just long fingers coming up to grab the building.
What the fuck?
Just long, thin fingers. Between, like, each joint on the finger, the length of that particular stretch of bone was about, the height of a human.
That is awful. Okay. Well, this podcast will be a fun outlet for you to tell me about these horrifying dreams that I never knew about, because I did not know about that one. So was that sleep paralysis, or was it a dream?
It wasn't. I'm gonna say it fell into dream category.
Yeah, your dreams are sometimes more horrifying than your sleep paralysis. You're experiencing a whole other reality sometimes. It's terrifying.
Yeah, the dream was out of body. For me, it doesn't become sleep paralysis until I'm aware that I can't move my physical body.
Okay.
Then it becomes sleep paralysis.
Okay. In Japan, sleep paralysis is commonly referred to as a practice called kanahibari, which points to an evil spirit being summoned to suffocate your enemies. That is saying is a summoner would call upon an entity to suffocate its enemies while sleeping.
So it's like an attack?
Yes.
Like it's not just like a bad spirit or demon. Yes. It's actually an attack.
Yes, it is like a person attacking you with mythological or witchcraft, which also it happens in old hag syndrome and Western beliefs, where they're saying that sleep paralysis is the devil or witchcraft, where someone has called upon something to attack you.
Mm-hmm. Which then kind of sounds like it falls in the same category as, like, evil eye. I mean, you know what that is, right? So evil eye was, like, a very common superstition. I know in late antiquity it was a very common superstition, and people would carry charms around to ward off evil eye, but if someone looked at you with ill intent, then they could potentially project an evil presence onto you after that they had left.
Goals. Hashtag goals. In Cambodia, sleep paralysis is attributed to a ghost pushing you down while you sleep. And in some regions of Spain, the pasanta, a black dog or cat, invades people's homes and sits upon sleepers' chests in an attempt to asphyxiate them. Which, again, with the black cat stuff, y'all. A lot of people, these accounts, they're sleeping on their back, and then they feel like something is pressing on their chest. Because the most common advice I see for sleep paralysis, again, as someone who doesn't experience sleep paralysis, is sleep on your side and it won't happen.
Huh.
The most common descriptor of sleep paralysis is something sitting on your chest and obstructing your breathing. And I think the earliest depiction of sleep paralysis is that classical painting by Fuseli, where the demon is sitting on the woman's chest.
Yeah.
That came up over and over again in my research.
Yeah, I know that one you're talking about. Yeah. So, I mean, I mostly grew up with a fairly secular mindset, with a very, not necessarily secular, but just a very materialistic view in the world, which is what you can touch and measure, those are the real things. And everything else is delusion. And that was the way I saw the world for a long time. As a result, for most of my teenage and early 20s years, anytime that I was experiencing sleep paralysis, I experienced it and contextualized it in that way. I've had a bit of a paradigm shift in the meantime, which makes me look back at certain things in a different way. But I didn't grow up believing certain cultural ideas about what was happening to me. So as a result, I don't think my brain has formed those concepts around it quite as much. Obviously, there are just some general ones which just come out of being born and raised in a, European descended culture here in the Americas. But I'm going to list what happens to me, and I'd like to hear back how this matches with other people, and I'd like to find out what the commonalities are and what the differences are, because I'm still forming an idea of what that I'm actually experiencing.
So yes, please write us at SpookiStoryPodcast@gmail.com. That is spooky with an I.
Yes, please. And we could even do an episode where we come back and I compare and contrast.
Yes,
I think that would be great.
If you're comfortable, we can read your accounts. If you would not like them read, please specify.
Yes. So things usually happen in spurts for me. And usually, I think you've noticed this, times in my life when I've talked about having more episodes of sleep paralysis, they also seem to be times when that you've told me that I've sleptwalked more often. At least that's the way that I've understood it.
For me, you've kept your sleep paralysis, I guess, kind of close to the chest. I actually didn't know you experienced sleep paralysis until a good 8-9 years into our relationship.
Wait, so only like 2 years ago?
Yeah, only very recently did I realize that you were experiencing sleep paralysis.
Well, what about that time that we were at your parents' house? That was several years ago, and I told you that I'd fallen asleep and there was something in the backyard trying to get in.
But you didn't tell me that, you couldn't move. You didn't tell me you were awake. I thought you were dreaming.
Oh, okay.
And at that point, I had experienced you sleepwalking and talking to things that I couldn't see. So I was not able to determine the difference. And until you told me in the last couple of years, I just had sleep paralysis. I did not know that you were having sleep paralysis. This was something that for 80% of our relationship, I did not know you were experiencing.
I guess I just lumped it all together into bad dream and didn't really look into it at all.
Yeah.
So I guess that's also why I didn't have the words. I didn't have the language to describe what had happened then at the time.
Yeah, because when with the closet incident and the backyard incident, I thought you were telling me about a dream. And at that point, I didn't know how to distinguish between you sleepwalking and you actually talking to me. So all of that bled together for me. So learning that you have sleep paralysis is actually a fairly new thing in our relationship.
Oh, okay. Maybe I kind of realized for myself, I feel like I kind of figured it out around the same time that we got married.
Okay.
I think
which still, over the course of our relationship, isn't
That's
that
true.
long.
That's true.
That's 4 years compared to 10.
But yeah, it seems like when I get disruptive sleep patterns, they kind of happen in clumps. But there will be other things I'll get as well. I do get out-of-body experiences during my dreams, which I'll talk about that a little more after the fact, because that's a lot bigger than just being out of body. I also get exploding head syndrome, which is...
That's another new one. I didn't know you had that.
So do you remember me telling you earlier that I got sleep paralysis a couple times when I dozed off when I was in the library at college?
Yes.
Okay. Anytime that I would manage to come out of that, it would be with just an enormous bang. It was like a firework had been lit next to me. There was like a concussive wave that went through my head. But also that just sometimes will happen to me. The first time I remember getting exploding head was in civics and economics in high school. We were watching something in class, so the lights were off, it was dark, and I was just sitting there, and all of a sudden I just jumped up in my chair and everyone looked at me. And I looked around and I was like, what was that bang?
Oh, wow.
But thing is, I was really drowsy. I hadn't slept well the night before, and the lights were off and we were watching a movie. So I was about to start dozing off in class. I was getting really sleepy, and then all of a sudden there was a loud bang. Yeah, it was like a shockwave pushed through my head. And it still happens every so often when I'm feeling drowsy. And usually I don't say anything.
Yeah, I had no idea I had no idea this was happening.
Here's something else that I experience, and this is completely new. This isn't in my notes, because I don't know what the term for this is. Sometimes when I start getting drowsy, I will feel a pressure at the very bottom of my spine, where my tailbone is, and it feels like something is pressing at my tailbone. It seems to send like a shockwave up my spine towards my head, and sometimes that will end with my head having a loud bang.
Huh.
I've never heard a term for it medically. So if anyone's listening to this and knows what that is, I would love to know for myself because I've never been able to find out. And it will also sometimes go along with like some kind of like a muscle spasm at the same time.
Huh, okay.
But yeah, okay, back to sleep paralysis. When I come out of a sleep paralysis episode, I will have an incredible headache. And most of my headaches usually happen when there's a low pressure system. I don't really get migraines, but if there's a weather change and a storm is moving in or the pressure suddenly drops, I will get headaches then. But I will get really bad headaches as sleep paralysis is happening. And I think it's through like mental stress and exertion, but it will still linger for a little bit after I wake up, and I'll still be kind of half asleep a little bit. I think that's why sometimes when this has happened to me and I've finally woken up, I've been moving around trying to talk about things or grabbing stuff out of my closet randomly that you have been wondering if I've been sleepwalking or I'm still asleep in some fashion, because usually this headache is so bad that it actually prevents me from thinking clearly immediately after. Usually there is a presence in the room. However, like I've said, this presence has never touched me yet.
You say yet, and so ominous.
No. And with extreme exertion, sometimes I'm able to just like tense my fingers or my toes a little bit. A lot of times this exertion continues to where when I finally do come out of it, that's when that I just jump out of bed all of a sudden and I'm just screaming into the darkness. My sleep paralysis doesn't usually happen when I'm falling asleep. It usually happens just in the middle of the night. It does happen sometimes when I'm waking up, which I guess it could still be in a REM cycle because REM happens periodically throughout the night.
I did read a few episodes of people in the middle of the night waking up and realizing that there's something in their room. And some people even have it happen multiple times a night.
When it happens when I'm sleeping, it happens between about 3 and 4 a.m.
Okay.
If I've ever looked at the clock around that time, it might be a little before 3, it might be a little after 4, but sometimes when that I'm exerting myself, I actually force myself into an out-of-body experience. Most of my dreams are out-of-body experiences because most of the time in my dreams, the physical world is fairly well mirrored within my dream. So when I've been out of body and I'm near myself, though, I have never actually been able to turn around and look at myself. There's always been something that stopped me from doing it. I've always been afraid of looking at myself while I'm out of body. I've always been afraid of what I would see.
Sorry, that was just really upsetting. That does remind me of the account from Raji from Makeup with Raji, where she was saying that she woke up in her first sleep paralysis episode looking at herself sleeping.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking at the time. I can't actually bring myself to look at myself. So if my sleeping essence steps away from my body, it will always back up into. It never turns around to go back into. Does that make any sense? So like I'll fall back into my body, but I'll never...
Interesting.
Yeah, turn around and...
Okay. Have you ever looked in a mirror while you were sleeping?
No.
Do mirrors exist in this dream world?
Yes.
Okay. Do you consciously not look at them?
Correct.
Oh.
Affirmative.
Oh.
I avoid doing anything that will trigger lucid dreaming in my dreams. For example, turning on lights, looking at my hands, looking at a clock, or writing in a book, because all these things become jumbled and confused. Anyone who lucid dreams, you'll know if you try to turn on lights in a dream, they don't turn on. Or if you look at your hands, you'll have more or less than 5 fingers. Or you look at a book and the writing will be all weird and jumbled and you'll realize that you're dreaming. Now, some people have good control over their lucid dreams and they're able to then control it beyond there. For me, anytime I lucid dream, it always triggers a sleep paralysis episode because I realize that I'm asleep. In my sleep, wherever my consciousness goes, it's always aware that my physical body is sleeping somewhere. And so the realization that my physical body is trapped and unable to move and not connected to my conscious experiences is what triggers sleep paralysis for me. I don't like to go very far once I realize that I'm separated from my body, because as I go farther from where my body is, in my dreams, the world always gets more distorted.
I'm Sorry. This is very alarming. Please continue.
Okay. And I'm curious if this happens with anyone else either. Does anyone else have a consistent dream world architecture that they experience? Do you move through a world that is similar but different to ours? And for me, so long as I'm not aware that my body and my essence are separated, I can just keep going. I can explore as long as I want to. Eventually, I find my way back. As soon as I realize that my body and my essence are separated, it becomes a terrifying experience, and I can't go that far because there's a fear that I'll become lost and not be able to find my way back because the dream world architecture is different and things will suddenly become incredibly chaotic. There will be things that will try to prevent me from getting back to my body in the dream world, and I become afraid that I'll just never make it back and I'll be stuck in this world forever away from my body. I'm also curious about if other people have, like I said, specific dream world architecture. So there are consistent places I can go to in my dreams that are places that mirror our world, but there are also different distortions of them. And if people have this experience, I would love to know what those are, because I would be super curious if, like, collectively, humans are dreaming about the same places. I'd be curious if the geography matches, because I can very explicitly describe some of these locations that I go to. Like Nashville, Tennessee has a specific geography which is very different. It's still Nashville. For example, I've told you East Nashville, where we live, in my dream world, is a fair bit more urbanized, but also for some reason I travel to Greenville, South Carolina a fair bit. I don't know why.
While you're sleeping in your dreams.
In my dreams.
We don't go there in real life.
No, we don't. That's what's crazy.
We have no reason to be there.
And I know what it's like because I've been there. I've been through there, so I can actually say how things are different.
But when is the last time we've been in South Carolina?
The last time was some years ago when we came back from your friend's wedding. It was right after we moved
6 years ago.
Yeah, right after we moved to Nashville.
And you still in your dream world go to South Carolina?
Actually, it's been a while since I've been there.
All right. Okay.
But for a while, I just kept going to that one place. I know it's not really scientific, but I'd love to find someone who has that same effect and find out if there's a collaborative dream world architecture that people similarly experience within their subconscious or go to in their dreams.
This is one of the more jarring things I've heard. I personally rarely ever even remember my dreams, and if I do, they're not geographically centered. They're just like some nonsense that's happening somewhere. There's no commonalities. So this is, especially just knowing like how logical you are about things. It's just,
I guess it makes sense for me because in my waking moments, I am very focused on where I am physically in the world. I usually have a fairly good idea of where that I am. That's why I don't get lost very often.
Yeah, you have the best sense of direction I've ever known in a person. You can look at a map for 5 minutes and have it memorized for the rest of your life. So it is interesting how those two things correlate.
It would make sense that in my dreams I'd be focused on the spatial relation between different objects that I'm going. Another thing that happens in my dreams, and this is just a tangent, is I'm scared of heights, but I'm not scared of heights and edges when I'm awake. So is there anyone else who also has phobias in their dream that they don't have in real life? A few months ago we were in New York at the top of the Empire State Building. I had no problem. But when I'm on top of buildings outside like that in my dreams, it is a terrifying experience. I'll go full on panic attack. I'll get as low and as close to the ground as possible and as far away from the edge as possible.
Yeah, you have a very consistent personality and worlds in which you dream in, which I personally don't. I would be very interested to know if anyone else experiences that. I don't know if that's related to sleep paralysis, so I guess if that's something you experience, do you also get sleep paralysis? So sleep paralysis has been a common factor in folklore for thousands of years, but I came across the first clinical description of sleep paralysis that was ever recorded, as far as we are aware. It was recorded in 1664 by a Dutch physician.
1664 is actually a little more recent.
It is very recent, yeah.
Than I would, because I'm sure this is something that has been around with humans from the from hunter-gatherer.
Yeah.
Yet, I wonder if before it was always just interpreted in a spiritual, religious fashion.
Yeah, and it seems like
maybe.
it was, where it was just the neighborhood witch cursed me, or I'm being attacked by the djinn, or, you know, the long fingernailed creature is coming off my roof to gut me. Ugh. The first recorded time that someone went to the doctor for this event was in 1664, and it was recorded by a Dutch physician by the name of Isbrand van Dijmerbroek. Probably butchered that. And speaking of me butchering language, this is what he wrote. A woman 50 years of age, in good plight, fleshy, strong, and plethoric, sometimes troubled with a headache, and catarrhus falling upon her breast in the winter. The last winter, molested with no catharsis, catarrhus, sure, Catarrhs. Catars?
I do like the description of the woman as fleshy, though. I should use that in my own fiction writing.
She's fleshy. I looked up the meaning of the word plethoric, and it was, like, full of blood.
I guess if they were into that, you know, for humors thing.
I hope that one might be full of blood. Dear listener, I hope this message finds you full of blood.
Just like fleshy, a fleshy person.
But very sore in the daytime, but in the nighttime, when she was composing herself to sleep, sometimes she believed the devil lay upon her and held her down, sometimes that she was choked by a great dog or thief lying upon her breast, so that she could hardly speak or breathe. And when she endeavored to throw off the burthen, she was not able to stir her members. And while she was in that strife, sometimes with great difficulty, she awoke of herself. Sometimes her husband, hearing her make a doleful, inarticulate sound, waked himself. At what time she was forced to sit up in bed and fetch her breath. Sometimes the same fit returned twice in a night. Huh. So that was some heavy language, just to say she felt something restricting her breathing. Sometimes it was a demon, sometimes it was a thief, sometimes it was an animal.
I do keep harping on it. I love the description as fleshy. I would like to start a new internet challenge where that people on their dating profile describe themselves as fleshy.
That's going to go south so fast.
And see what I want to know what the results are. I can't do this because obviously, you know, been with you for a decade. So
I just see this.
So just vicariously, I want to know if fleshy is used in a personal description on a dating profile, how that goes down.
Yes, please describe yourself as fleshy, a DJ, and your profile picture better be you holding a fish.
With sunglasses.
Swipe left. Don't even.
Yeah, I guess today, because dreaming is said to happen during rapid eye movement, REM sleep. They say that when REM sleep happens near the beginning or as you're waking up, that's when that sleep paralysis happens. One thing, though, that I would love to know about REM sleep, and I've been told, and I've seen this on the internet, that your dreams only last for 7 minutes. But that can't be right. Something about that has to be wrong, because me and everyone else who describes their dreams, these dreams go on for way more than 7 minutes. And I've seen this in several places on the internet. So this has to be some kind of urban myth. But if it's not, I haven't actually figured out an explanation for how that your brain can process so much information within 7 minutes to make up a dream that lasts for several hours. That would require an immense amount of processing of information when even in your most focused moments in your life, you can't process that much information in that short amount of time.
So you didn't find any study that suggests 7 minutes?
No, this is just a whole bunch of people who claim to be experts online, just like you and I claim to be experts on a podcast. So I
have never once claimed. I am not an expert in anything.
I'm not either.
I'm not an expert in myself. I just want to clarify that.
No, I'm being dumb. No, but this is just a whole bunch of people just saying this online, but I've never actually found the source study to where this information supposedly comes from.
Well, it's the same as when I was looking up how many people experience sleep paralysis, and I found such a discrepancy in how many people experience it and at what ages and what genders, and there's nothing consistent, just the way that there's no consistent information about dreams. No one really knows. It's just one of those mysteries of the brain.
Yeah.
Like, are you going somewhere else, or is it just neurons firing randomly? Is it related to things in your life, or again, is it just your brain trying to make images and make sense out of random firing synapses?
Yeah, and for most of my life, I've understood dreams and all your experiences as random firing synapses. The only problem that I've had recently is when this description of random firing synapses then gets translated into an experience. And an experience in and of itself is not something that actually has material form. Our experiences actually exist without any material. You experience touching the table, but really it's your fingers sending information to your brain, which then says, hey, I'm touching the table right now, or us looking at something and seeing colors. How do we know that the colors that we see, how do we know that image is the same image that anyone else sees? Because there's no way to, we could draw it with colors and paint it, but then someone would look at it and they might just look at it in their own mental image. I've seen lots of explanations about how that our experiences are only material things happening, but then what I want to know is, how does that actually create an experience? What is the connection between an experience, which can then move into the form of memory, versus the actual external stimulus that triggers that experience in your brain?
This calls into question the whole concept of reality.
Well, yeah, and the whole concept of what the self is. Because when you get down to a very materialistic version of the world, how do those things experience each other? When you say that one's conscious experience is just images and sounds and feelings being played in the head, what are those things being played for? They're being played for oneself, but that still requires a perspective. That still requires an initial perspective to be contextualizing this raw information. And where can you put that? You can put that in the brain, but then it reduces down to absurdity. You then have to say, well, where in the brain? And then does this perspective move about the brain as these synapses are fired? Like, it becomes an absurd question at a certain point in time as to where the actual perspective that experiences is located in the 3D physical world.
I'm sorry, my brain is now melting. And just all of existence is being called into question, and I am now contemplating parallel realities and the idea that maybe we're in a simulation, maybe both. I don't know. Like, it just... I mean, reality has been destroyed for me. I am confused.
I do like the simulation description. I think it's an interesting thought experiment. The only problem that I have with it is that there's not a way to test it as of right now. So it's not a testable hypothesis.
I mean, if anything, there's no way to test any paranormal theories at all.
If you think about, like, what I was talking about last week with, like, looking for explanations why that people say New England is haunted, you can look at actual reported number of hauntings in a state, you can look at ley lines, you can look at the heat map density.
But, like, all of those things still fall back on, can those sightings be tested?
No.
Can that account be tested? Can you find anything in ley lines? Can you look at EMFs? Can you, like, carbon, like...
No, the best
all of it is subjective.
Yeah, no, the best you can do is you can just say this many reports happen within a certain density within this area.
But, I mean, again, but that's still,
which is just a survey.
Varies account by account. It's, again, just one person's word. We've tangented way off of sleep paralysis at this time.
Well, I think it's important because sleep paralysis, like sleep, has to do with an experience. Mm-hmm. And because there's not I've seen and heard several people who have claimed they know exactly what consciousness is, and sometimes they'll even just say it's an illusion. But then that also falls into the absurdity argument to where if you say the only thing we have to determine our reality around us is an illusion, then it becomes absurd. It becomes the equivalent of saying, like, time isn't real, when that's one of the only ways we have of determining our lives. Like, it just becomes an absurd statement.
Yeah, I guess it's one of those things where you can both prove and disprove time.
Like, you can't exist without it.
Yeah.
Like, there's...
Even if you disprove it, what does it matter? Like, how do you function without it? Society expects you to function within time.
Yeah.
So even if you're so smart that you disprove time to yourself, what does that mean for you?
But also time
What
is...
do you do then?
Yeah, but also time is like a place that you can go. Like, we move in time, and yet no one tries to claim, like, the 3 spatial dimensions aren't real. No one's that pretentious enough to say, like, left and right aren't real. Forward and back isn't real. Up and down isn't real. And yet those are places that we go.
There is that guy, and he's probably arguing with someone on TikTok right now.
Yeah, I mean, there are pretentious people.
And he's like some dude from Idaho.
But the reason I bring up time is because, like I was saying about the sleep, with people saying, oh, your dreams only happen within this amount of time. Mm-hmm. And yet that doesn't actually match the experience that you have. When physicists say the world is 3 spatial dimensions and then 1 of time, that our experiences always happen in the time dimension. Like, we see the space dimension around us, but our actual experience is us moving through the time dimension. It's not really us moving through the space dimension. It's us seeing different angles from the space as we move through time. So then it becomes like an absurd argument to say your experiences aren't real, just as much as absurd to say that time isn't real, because those two are more interconnected even than... Okay, that is the end of that tangent for me. That is the end of that tangent.
My brain is exploding. So we talk about dreams and sleep paralysis and how they relate to our reality and the reality that we experience. But there are a lot of theories around sleep paralysis that suggest maybe if you're experiencing sleep paralysis, you're seeing an entity that exists in another dimension, something that coexists with you and that typically you don't see, but for some reason some people when they're sleeping do see them. Or you're jumping to a whole other dimension, or you're jumping times. When people talk about sleep paralysis, I've heard a lot of theories that you may accidentally bring something back with you. And there's a lot of crossover with sleep paralysis and astral projection, which I think we should get into the concept of astral projection at a later time. There's a huge debate as to whether or not sleep paralysis is paranormal phenomenon or a purely scientific phenomenon. And by that, I mean known science, known testable science. Some people will attribute sleep paralysis to visiting other dimensions, other timelines, seeing spirits that aren't really there or are there and not experienced in your physical world. I found an unusual and very specific description from an author by the name of Matt Carden. Carden is a horror fiction author. He detailed an episode from 1993 that he had and detailed it in an article. And I would like to read a passage from that article.
Okay.
I emerged circa 3 a.m. from a sleep so deep that it was almost a coma, to find myself paralyzed by a dark figure hovering over me at the foot of the bed. When I say I was paralyzed by the figure, that's precisely accurate. I had the sense that this thing was responsible for the awful state of paralysis that had unaccountably taken hold of me. And yes, I do know, and I think I may even have known then, that the physical paralysis that naturally occurs during REM sleep. In the presence of that dark figure, I was immediately panicked, horrified, positively sickened with terror and dread, in a way and to a degree that I had not only never experienced, but had never even conceived. And this horror was a result not only of my paralysis, nor the figure's presence and frightening appearance, but of the awful knowledge of its reasons for being there, which gripped me suddenly and totally. The thing was a vaguely man-shaped vortex of darkness, and I knew, with a kind of physiological weight that I had never imagined, that it was the anti-me, that it was my own personal black hole, and that its presence, in fact, its very existence, meant my utter annihilation. I actually felt it sucking my entire being into it, like a roaring, devouring hurricane meant for me and me alone. This author in their article moves on from this experience and doesn't really evaluate it as anything paranormal until later when they are in college and meet someone who becomes concerned that they have a dark presence or a dark one attached to them. And according to this person, this dark entity is an unincarnate or disincarnate spirit that longs for fleshly existence, and that sometimes one of these spirits will attach itself to a person and live vicariously through his or her bodily experience. But when it does this, it accidentally or involuntarily imparts a kind of night-sighted emotional cast onto its host simply by the fact that its own nature and presence, so that its host outlook, mindset, attitude, and overall view and experience of life are tilted with a certain darkish and anti-life direction.
I guess one of the interesting things, like this author, it sounds like they're describing, even though there's nothing sexual being described, it almost sounds incubus-like with this thing trying to absorb a life force almost from them.
That was something interesting about the idea of an incubus or succubus that I researched in the past. When I researched it in the context of sleep paralysis, it didn't have anything sexual involved. It was specifically a demon sitting on your chest or something, or taking something from you, which was kind of an interesting discrepancy in the definition of an incubus or a succubus. More commonly, it was referred to as a succubus because patriarchal society. That one was a new one for me that I'm still personally trying to digest, where it's saying that, and I could be wrong, but the way that I interpret this is that this is almost like a possession, where demonic presence is trying to take over a sleeping entity. Which, as we mentioned earlier, kind of jumps into astral projection, where something is trying to inhabit the body or replace the soul in someone's body.
Which is curious because in my sleep paralysis, there are frequently all these different entities that are trying to gain access to the room that I'm in. Like I said, I hope I never have a sleep paralysis episode where that I'm touched by some horrible creature, but there's always an attempt to come close. There's always this existential horror and this attempt to force away.
Ugh. Sorry. I've never had sleep paralysis, but this is so unsettling.
But yeah, and like every story that I can tell you, it's always, even the ones that I've had here, that I've told you about, I'm not going to talk about right now. I'll wait until that we've moved somewhere else and I'll tell the stories in more detail because I want to tell them right now while we're still here. But there's always an entity trying to enter the room, often through a window, but sometimes through like a door, but just always trying to enter the space that I'm in. And it's always like met with like an internal sense of panic, like in the amount of force. It's like if you were on one side of a door and someone was trying to break down the door on the other side, and you're just like leaning into the door, pushing it as hard as you can with every ounce of force that you can muster to keep this thing from entering through this door and gaining access to the space that you're in. And that's always how it feels. It feels that kind of intensity every time. And that's why I would love to know if people know how to get through this experience and not panic, because every time it happens, it's a horrifying, panicking experience and just such an extremely vulnerable experience. Because, yeah, at the time, it always, like, it feels more than life or death. It feels like your very essence is at stake, like your very sense of self is at stake every time. Like, it's not even just a threat of physical harm. It's like a threat to, like, your...
Like your very soul.
Yeah, it's your essence, yeah.
Ugh. Ugh.
And that's why, like, I'm pretty sure the loudest times you've ever heard me scream have been those times when, like, I've been at your parents' and I've woken up just screaming bloody murder. Mm-hmm. It's because that's what I'm coming out of at the time.
Ugh. Okay.
And I think because dreams always occupy this, like, non-Euclidean space, sometimes I wonder if people are experiencing the same entity and just using familiar words to describe it, if their brain is experiencing the same stimulus and just creating that image for themselves based on things that are familiar so they can understand something that's, like, horrifying them on an existential level. At least I wonder that for myself sometimes. That's why I hope that nothing ever touches me or sits on my chest in my sleep, is because up until now, no, that hasn't happened.
Oh, God. This is so upsetting. Ugh. Like, I knew this was going to creep me out, but this is, like, this hits me on such a personal level because, like, I know when this is... I think what's so disturbing for me is that this happens and I don't know it's happening. Like, sometimes you're just totally in a fight for... your very soul, your very essence, lying next to me, and I don't know, and there's nothing I can do. It's upsetting.
Physicists sometimes talk about there being extra dimensions that are possibly wound up within very small sections of space. Like I described the entity in the backyard at your parents', like it might have been in one place, but the essence was able to move through.
Oof.
Our normal understandings of space didn't work that way. Like it could shorten the distance between spaces. It didn't have to move through up, down, left, and right. It could move, and that's always how these things are.
I'm sorry again. My brain is just exploding.
We did this episode a little different, so if this format was easier to listen to than the other formats where we alternate back and forth, let us know. We're still setting format down that we can use consistently from episode to episode.
We're figuring it out. This is early, so everything is still very malleable. And, we're not super public people. So, maybe you're listening to this in 2025 or something. Catching up on the backlog. I'm tangenting now, my goodness.
Huh. I mean, maybe, yes. If that's the case, then hopefully by 2025 we've improved.
Or we just figured out our lives in general and the world hasn't collapsed.
But yeah, this was episode 5, last episode before Halloween. Everybody have a happy Halloween.
A very safe Halloween.
Yes.
Be careful.
Yes.
Only be mildly spooky.
Yes. If you have a black cat, keep your black cat safe and indoors with you. Don't let your black cat wander around the neighborhood. We will keep a very close eye on our cat to make sure that she's safe with us for Halloween this year.
Mm-hmm. Keep them all very, very safe, very, very protected.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they need us this time of year, so take good care of your black cats. As we move into November and December, we're going to have a new set of episodes lined up. So currently, we actually don't have next week's ready to spoil yet.
No, we don't know what next week is going to be about.
Yeah, so...
if you have suggestions, please email us, talk to us. Please be our friend.
I'd love to hear some other viewpoints from what I've been talking about this week, but also some of the other things I've been talking about from previous episodes too. I'd love to form a dialogue, especially from maybe people who might have more direct experience with the subject matter. Of course, I'm an amateur, so I'm just an amateur popularizer of certain subjects. That's how I see myself. So
you seem very experienced in sleep paralysis, though. So if you are also experienced in sleep paralysis, please tell us. Mm-hmm. Tell us all about your sleep paralysis. Mm-hmm. Let's talk. Let's form like a whole Discord page about sleep paralysis. Mm-hmm. Let's figure it out.
Let's make the sleep paralysis world map happen, because I'm curious what the landscape of that looks like. There's some dark edges of places I've been scared to go that I'm curious to hear from other people what happens there.
What?
I guess we don't need to make like a very long outro this time, because like I said, we don't know what's coming up next. But yeah, stick around and hit us up, and we'll see you soon.
Spooky Story, episode 5.
My name's Peter.
I am Rena.
We said our names this time.
That's right, we didn't last time.
And I'm Until next time, take it sleazy.
How dare you?
Too late.